Welcome, Wargamers, back to the deadly battlefields of the mortal realms as we explore yet another epic moment in history within the AOS universe. Today's tale is short and sweet and comes from the Stormcast Eternals battle tome, and it's called The Shattered Siege. When the siege towers of Dagram Thule approached the Bayard Lodge in Akshi, 20 retinues of decimators from the Sons of Malice strike down into the Chaos Horde's midst. Led by Lord Castellan, Silithian Blackstar, they cleave their way towards the towering constructs before hacking the legs from the twisted gargants that push them. In doing so, they save the magma hold and forge an unbreakable bond between the Stormhost and the Fyreslayer Lodge. Okay, so let's recap this here a bit. We find ourselves in Akshi, Realm of Fire, birthplace of the Fyreslayers as a faction, and specifically outside the walls of the Bayard Lodge, which I was unable to find on any of the maps. If you know where it is, throw it in the comments down below and I'll pin it to the top. But this lodge is in trouble. A massive chaos army armed with siege towers slowly advances upon it. Now, to be honest, I thought this was kind of odd, because Fyreslayer lodges are often, not always, built deep into mountains or volcanic locations so they can use the geothermal heat and magma for their forges. But this specific lodge must have at least one side facing outwards. Some wall or edge that would make, like a well-armed siege tower a real threat. How this never came up before throughout the Age of Chaos, I have no idea. Maybe it just took the Chaos Forces this long to think, maybe we just go over the wall. Regardless, these two siege towers are being pushed into place by Chaos Gargants, living siege weapons in their own right. We've covered them extensively on the Sons of Behemoth Week. Not so much Chaos one specifically, but what Gargants can do. They can also make, of course, powerful workhorses when needed. My mind immediately jumps to thinking that these towers, they must be huge, right? They're just nuts. Something imposing on the horizon, slowly being pushed along by an equally terrifying monster whose feet are hidden in a seemingly endless tide of enemies. The point is, for the Bayard Lodge, things are in a bad way. Then, of course, the Stormcast Eternals drop in. 20 retinues of decimators. This is horde clearing units by their profile. And while they do fight the big Chaos army, they make a straight line for these Gargants, which is curious because they aren't really the best tool for that job. Those would be the Protectors, I think. I'm trying to remember all the different Stormcast names. They kind of blend together in my mind, and I apologize. But there is one that specifically hunts monsters. By taking out the Gargants, the siege equipment sputters to a halt, and we don't have a real conclusion to the battle except to say that the Stormcast Eternals survived and formed some kind of lasting bond with the Fyreslayers. This could mean that the enemy warlord Dagram Thule straight up got all his men slaughtered, which is totally possible. Decimators are horde clearing things, so if they did kill the Gargants, it stands to reason that they could probably just slice and dice through a Chaos Horde. It could also mean that seeing his siege equipment halted, he sounded the retreat since now there's no way inside the castle. It's kind of the equivalent of if you're playing, Warhammer Total War and all your siege stuff gets destroyed outside the gate, might as well just give up because there's not really a way inside. But an interesting thing to think about is how the Fyreslayers would have reacted. We don't really know much about the Bayard Lodge. They're basically just a paint scheme within the battle tome. But what we know about Fyreslayers in general is that they believe in these life debts. When Sigmar freed Grimnir in the Age of Myth, the first thing he did was swear a debt, which ultimately led to him getting shattered by Volcatrix. But the point is, I'm not saying it's a smart tradition, but it's something they are very likely to do, so I can absolutely see them joining up with the Stormcast Eternals after this point and being genuine friends. Now on to the combatants of our story. I'll be honest, in terms of lore behind each faction, this is the least amount of information possible, right? I feel like I say that a lot, but the Sons of Malice, again, pretty much a paint scheme, and that's about all we know for them, and we know nothing about this Chaos army. Now, the Sons of Malice, the tiny bits that we do have kind of paint them as very grim, very dark. Again, Malice being like the sundered core of the old world, and it sort of hangs in the sky as this like dark reminder of like chaos has done this before, and it's going to consume everything if we let it, so we need to stop it. So they tend to be very grim, very dark in their temperaments. They take things very seriously. And while there may have been supporting heroes, obviously they could have brought down a Lord Relictor, they could have brought down a whole bunch of stuff. The defining unit they brought down was a whole bunch of Decimators, which are the heavy paladin units that are fantastic at slaying just about anything around them. They're the ones, if you are playing the actual game, they don't have a determined weapon attack profile. It's like anyone who's in range basically gets smacked by this huge thing. And so I love it. I think for that role, as far as, if Sigmar was looking down and seeing this huge chaos horde, you send in the horde killers. But when they got there, they realized, well, wait, we can stifle this entire assault if we take out these big gargants. Which, we're going to flip over here. Again, we know very little about the Chaos faction in this story, but we do know it's defined by a bunch of gargants. So, what I would suggest if you want to bring this story to the tabletop, I do suggest playing in the realm of Fire, Akshi. You can have the Stormcast, obviously, I think will be the main thing, or you could do Fyreslayers with Stormcast allies. Yes, it's true that the Fyreslayers were, only kind of secondary to the plot and setting of this small story, but they do, it would be their lodge. I don't think it would be crazy at all to think that some of them would run out and fight once the Gargants were destroyed and the rest of it's just mopping up chaos dudes. Oh yeah, I can definitely see them getting out there and shaking things up. So feel free to do whatever kind of chaos army you want. I would say, factor in some Gargants, at least have one as kind of like an ally, or if you want to be like full thematic, bring two no matter what the points are for you. And as far as a battle plan, I looked through several books trying to find one that was very reminiscent of this, and I just kind of struggled to find something. So what I would say is having the Gargants die needs to be the goal of the Stormcast player. I do think that's true, and you can determine with your opponent by what turn, maybe 3 or 4. I'd probably go 4. But if the Gargants are not destroyed by the end of it, simple attacker-defender, the attacker, meaning the Stormcast, needs to kill them by turn 4, and the defender, in this case the Chaos Horde, needs to keep them alive, because that means that they can move the siege equipment up. Again, I know it's not flashy, I know it's not complicated, but the truth is, this is just one of those fun stories that I wanted to talk about because it's one of those things that reminds me of why Age of Sigmar is so cool. Just these epic fights where, all hope is lost for these Fyreslayers. They have no knowledge that aid is coming. And then all of a sudden, these dudes just appear. 20 retinues of Stormcast Eternal Paladins just armed to the teeth and just start hacking through hordes and hordes of chaos. Now, I'm sure a bunch of Stormcast died. Like I said, we don't really know the conclusion to the fight. That's something that you and your opponent have to decide for yourselves on the tabletop. But the truth is, it seems like a really intense story. I try to think about scenes from, Lord of the Rings? When, I think it's Helm's Deep, when they have these, the orcs come in with the big towers that they can pour troops over the wall with. It's like, what if they were able to just neuter those and it just came down to a bunch of dudes with swords outside a giant wall? Like, it would take forever to get over it or break it or anything like that. So you can really knock the wind out of the sails of an assault by just removing the Gargants, removing the war engines and that kind of stuff. It effectively neuters the entire army. And so I liked that they had a story where the Stormcast fought smart, but not just hard, right? If we just cut the legs off the Gargants, all of a sudden they can't siege anymore, and all of a sudden it's just a bunch of dudes standing out in the open. Also, if you're the Chaos player, this gives you ample opportunity to try new things, to try weird things. You can just take whatever, and honestly, if you have enough Marauders in your army, you will be very imposing and hard to beat. This is one of those little tidbits that I wouldn't mind if they expanded into a full book, because, there would have been an entire siege and that kind of stuff leading up to this point. Like, something happened that the warriors of the Baird Lodge didn't see an opportunity to go out there and just confront and fight face to face. Like, something had to have happened. And I think that that's something, it's kind of a shame the story doesn't touch on it, but the temperament of the Fyreslayers is so aggressive and so honor-bound that to see them locked inside their homes on the back foot meant that something really cool, but also probably very, very bad happened to them very recently, right? Because at that point, they just needed help. They just were at a loss of what to do. So I could absolutely see a short story or something like that explaining, this is what happened to them, this is how they got pushed to the brink, and then when the Stormcast came down, I can imagine once the siege equipment's done, and the Rune Father understands that, oh, this siege is done because they can't get over the walls, I imagine that they would just pour out of their magma hold and just start hacking and slashing because now the threat is really gone and now we can get vengeance. But I want to hear your thoughts. So if you are a Fyreslayer player, how would you reenact this, right? If you're a Stormcast player or a Chaos one, tell me what kind of factions or army bonuses you would go with. Of course, you could go with any of the dedicated Chaos gods, or you could just go Slaves to Darkness. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, and if there's one that's really helpful when it comes to making a battle plan or army list, I'll go ahead and pin it to the top because I love when the community does that kind of stuff. That's the best part of these stories, is just seeing everyone's opinion and ways to bring them to life. And I hope that these videos are just kind of the start of a conversation for you. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to catch you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Happy wargaming. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.